And we're back on. Sorry for that quick delay there, but I think it's all going to be worth it because I have something new that I want to show you all. Some live preview and prediction templates. We're going to be talking about 3 games today and also going over what's going on with Michigan because there were some intriguing updates. In fact, there's just an update like from 50 minutes ago by Yahoo Sports that said TCU knew of Michigan's sign stealing scheme prior to the college football playoff game, and they used dummy signals to dupe the Wolverines. That is, wow. If that's true, then my notion of Michigan totally being outcoached in that game is absolutely confirmed. Totally confirmed. Okay, hey SFS Inverted, how are you doing? Thank you, Marcus Aurelius Maximus, for encouraging people to like the stream. If you're new here, subscribe if you haven't already. And also comment your thoughts here down below. Simeon Barrow has withdrawn from the transfer portal and will return to Michigan State. That's intriguing. Why do you think he entered, and then why do you think he came back? I'm curious as to how and why he came back. Hello, Hummus Hero. How are you doing? I did release, it was later than I expected, but an Ohio State Wisconsin preview and prediction video. I'm taking Ohio State to win 31-13. I don't see Wisconsin. There's a part of me that feels like Wisconsin can win this game. I think this is a game where no one's expecting Wisconsin to win. So that could be an upset game, but I just think Ohio State's too good, and I don't really think they're fraudulent. But apparently, yeah, TCU used dummy signals to trick the Michigan staff. The dummy signals were old play calls that had been changed. Players are told to ignore the dummy signals and run the original play as called with the new signals. Sometimes we froze a play before the snap. One TCU coach said we'd call a play and then we'd signal in another play with an old signal, but we told players to run the original play. TCU, a 7.5-point underdog, beat Michigan 51-45 in that semifinal clash in the Fiesta Bowl. That was a game where I never understood why the TCU spread stayed at 7.5, but that was a game where Vegas knew something was up in regards to TCU's chances at pulling off an upset. And that was a stunning call, I think, by Vegas and a lot of people who picked TCU is, hey, no one's paying attention to this team. And Michigan hadn't faced really an offense of that type all season long. But there's so much news coming out about this with Michigan and Spygate, really. Another thing, rumor has it, that Michigan leaked their game plan for Tennessee and Clemson to South Carolina, which, if that is somehow proven to be true, I'm very doubtful that was the case. Somehow, if that's the truth, that explains why Spencer Rattler and why Marcus Satterfield became an epic duo overnight within the span of 2 weeks. I will say the reason Tennessee lost that game, though, wasn't because of South Carolina's offense. It was because Hendon Hooker got hurt. Tennessee, I think, tied the game early, and then it was South Carolina, I think, retook the lead, and then Hendon Hooker went down. I mean, it was mainly because of injury that I don't think Tennessee escaped that in a shootout. Rumor has it the reason why Michigan leaked this game plan is they were fearful of Tennessee's offense. Well, I don't know what to tell you. If the staff was scared of Tennessee, then we didn't deserve to go to the playoff last year because that defense was disgusting. Totally disgusting. I mean, that was an awful defense. Michigan would have scored 40 to 50 points with our offense last year on that defense. And with Clemson, If you're really scared about Clemson being in the playoff, don't even play in a New Year's Six Bowl because they were that bad last year. I can't. I don't get it. I don't get it. And I guess this is coming from a Michigan fan perspective more so here, but this has just been miserable. This has been very hard, challenging, whatever you want to call it. It's not good. It's not good whatsoever. At best, like I said in yesterday's video, at best, Connor Stalions is a lone quote-unquote gunman, and he was orchestrating this. Michigan still probably has to pay a fine. There's probably further investigation. Maybe some assistants are let go. It is what it is. And from reports that I've read from some Michigan insiders, which I'm taking that with a grain of salt because they're going to be more favorable toward the football program, it does sound like Michigan's whole staff isn't involved, so at least the whole program won't collapse. But there's always that cloud of anxiety that what I think is the best team in the country and what I think is the best Michigan football team since 1997 might be taken out of the playoff picture. They might not even be able to play in the Big Ten championship game, even though it's highly unlikely the playoff committee or the Big Ten Conference will intervene to block Michigan unless there's just all of these rumors and reports come to light. There's always that chance. So this has been stressful. I do think there's something there's something certain that I have an opinion on. If Michigan loses one game, they're out of the playoff. They have to win out. There's no route, even with chaos, due to the cloud over them. If Michigan loses to Ohio State, there's no way they're in the playoff. Vice versa, not exactly. I think Ohio State can sustain a loss, and because they've had a tougher schedule and this whole cheating stuff isn't over their head, an Ohio State that lost to Michigan and goes 11-1, I actually think it's very likely now, over 1 or 2 weeks after I said privately that I didn't know if Ohio State could get in without winning the Big Ten. I think it's likely, more likely now. I think Oklahoma and Texas looked even more vulnerable. Same with Washington and Oregon. Florida State will probably take everyone out of the ACC picture. Georgia, we'll have to see how they do against Florida, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Mizzou. They have a tough run. I wouldn't be shocked if Georgia loses a game, even though I think they'll go undefeated. But really what the latest news is, this is just from like a collection of sources that I've read. My eyes have been peeled all day. All day they've been peeled. In fact, I've probably wasted some of my time looking for information regarding Michigan football wrongdoing. All I can say is that that this runs deep. This runs deep. This is like Cointerpol from like FBI, CIA, J. Edgar Hoover counterintelligence stuff from the Cold War. Now, pardon me, if Stalions is really the head of that whole thing, then that's still horrible. But that pales in comparison to if there's a Michigan donor, if Harbaugh and Sharon Moore and Minter are orchestrating. If that happens, the program, I don't know what to tell you if that happens. From what I heard, insider Michigan reporting from, asking questions about university officials and athletic officials, or asking questions of them about what happened with the NCAA meeting, it sounds like it's bad, but there's some stuff in the media that's being overblown, likely for clicks and engagement. I mean, this is a big story. I mean, the Washington Post released an article on this, an article that, according to some of these reporters, is partially false. One thing that the Post and these insiders agree on is that Jim Harbaugh isn't implicated in any wrongdoing just for now. I'm going to read the chat, and then I'll get back to talking about this. But, okay, Wolv58, I haven't seen you in a while. I'm very happy. Very happy to have you back. In the short term, Michigan will be fine. Long term, however, Michigan football is dead. I don't know if I'd say dead, but there are some kind of punishments coming Michigan's way. I think it depends on how deep this runs. Because, look, I don't know. There's so much that I don't know. Part of my talk here is just saying what's being reported, reminding everyone that these are reports. The NCAA is the one who makes the final ruling. Same with the Big Ten. The Big Ten Conference hasn't moved an inch outside of alerting future opponents, and it doesn't sound like they'll intervene. And the NCAA met with Michigan today. So I don't know what to say other than in the short term, it seems like Michigan will be fine. Michigan will get to, play in the same way as if this wasn't happening for the rest of this season. But 2024 and beyond, I think there will be some kind of compensation in the sense of Michigan, you had a competitive advantage from 21 to the middle of 23. And now you have either scholarship reductions. The NCAA, I think, obviously wants Jim Harbaugh gone. So Harbaugh might be gone, and in that sense, maybe Michigan's dead. Maybe they hire the wrong coach. By the way, if Harbaugh can't return next year, I want Kalen DeBoer from Washington or Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. That's who I want. For irony's sake, I could also say I want Michigan to hire Brian Hartline as the offensive coordinator or as the head coach, which would be comedy gold. But that won't happen. Really, there's just so much of the unknown. I hate how Michigan fans are trying to justify what's going on. Sorry, we're so good at it. Attitude. The whole thing is slimy. Oh, it's stupid. It's stupid. And you know what's disappointing here? This is where I'm probably going to be ranting a bit. This is what's disappointing to me. Let me let me look up some stats for you all. There are people on my channel, and I like them, I respect them. However, I strongly disagree with this notion. You look at how teams have performed in games. Either Michigan or Ohio State is the clear cookie cutter number one. Georgia is not number one. They have not shown the consistency. They had one good game against Kentucky. Vanderbilt, unimpressive. They let Jacob Zeno throw for like over 200 yards on them. And Jacob Zeno's a good quarterback. However, doesn't have a good supporting cast. And UAB with Trent Dilfer hasn't exactly been phenomenal. Struggled versus a 2-5 South Carolina. Auburn, congratulations. Pete Golding's defense did a better job of holding them to less points. Georgia, they're good. They're near elite. I do not trust Georgia to three-peat. I really don't. I think if this Georgia team matched up with Ohio State, it would look like the 2021 SEC championship game all over again. And if Michigan and Georgia met tomorrow, Michigan would return the favor for that Orange Bowl. I think Michigan and Ohio State, looking at Ohio State's elite strength of record, which no one can compare to right now, they are the most tested team in the country. I think they have the most balanced defense, perhaps the best defense in all of America, and their offensive upside is untapped. Before I resume, SFS inverted. My Michigan projection for next season was 10-2 or 11-1. Oregon loses a lot. A lot of the tough matchups that Michigan has next year are teams who also lose a lot, along with Michigan. And even with this whole cheating thing, I think Ben Herbert's a cheat code. I think Michigan's deep. They've used the transfer portal well. Next year, in my mind, Ohio State would probably be a guaranteed loss because I think they'll return more. It's at home. They have more talent. And Day is too elite of a head coach to lose to Harbaugh for 4 or 5 years in a row. And probably a toss-up game. And I think Michigan plays at Oregon or the home game against Texas. That could be a toss-up game. But what's really disappointing to me, about Michigan, and I'm sorry if I'm rambling here, statistically, Michigan is by a mile the most efficient team in America. And you could say that, Stalions was a part of that. And you know what? I'll give you credit. Yes. However, we didn't need him in any of these 8 wins. And if Michigan comes close to replicating the success that they've had in their first 8 games, no one in the Big Ten outside of maybe Ohio State's beating them. Michigan has a 0.548 points per play margin. Georgia was number 1 in points per play margin for the previous 2 seasons. Number 2 in America's Washington, a full 0.16 points per play margin behind. Michigan, in terms of, let's just look at the points per play, not points per play margin because points per play is easier to explain. Michigan and USC are the only teams in America that score 0.65 points per play or more. LSU, Washington, and FSU score above 0.6 points per play. The problem is none of those teams have the defense that Michigan does. Michigan, when you look at scoring defense, is also a workhorse. And don't worry, I'm building up to something here. Michigan is number 1 in points per play allowed by a significant margin. They only allow 1/10 of a point per opponent play. That's ridiculous. That's utterly ridiculous. Michigan has scored 4 defensive touchdowns. They've allowed 5. Michigan, in terms of penalties, they're second in penalties per game. A lot of that's inflated from the rivalry game against Michigan State. They only commit 2.9 penalties per play. They're super disciplined. They're strong defensively. They look like they have Georgia's athletes from at least last year. If they win in the same dominant fashion, we'll be talking about their defense like 2021 Georgia's defense. Michigan could have won the whole thing this year without lifting a finger with illegal scouting. That's how good this team looks. And what makes me mad is there's going to be a shadow over this team if they win it all, if they choke in the semifinal again, if they lose to Ohio State. No matter what they do, there will be an asterisk. For other teams, I will view it as legit if they go 15-0 because the program's under pressure and Stalions is gone. Now, maybe the coaching staff, has already seen all the film and, whatever. And Stalions, provided them with all of that. But he's been the informant, supposedly. I mean, so many people are treating him as if he was, sort of the guru in a sense. And he was constantly providing every single play. Like, in a certain sense, he's being treated like he was a cheat code. Well, if our cheat code is gone and we go 15-0, to me that's evidence that we didn't need said cheat code to win it all this season. Because who have we played? This is the argument that everyone's been using, and I sort of agree with it. Michigan hasn't been tested yet. They haven't. We didn't need Stalions to beat any of these 8 teams. However, there's a double-edged sword in what I'm saying. If we lose to this Ohio State team or this Penn State team with the way that we've been playing right now, that might be evidence that indeed he was a cheat code. But we'll never know. I mean, that's the painful part of all of this. This is so ridiculous. So ridiculous. And you look at Michigan games in the previous 2 seasons, in my mind, there are only 2 games where I think Michigan might have used Stalions or that illegal scouting to win games that they would have lost. 2022 Ohio State, I think, is an obvious one. Even though entering the game, I think I don't know if I said this for a fact, but entering the game, my thought process is if Corum was starting, I might have picked Michigan to win. And I don't think that, Cornelius Johnson's long touchdowns or Edwards' long touchdowns, those weren't perfect play designs. Except for, his first touchdown, Donovan Edwards won, that might have been. Because that was, the perfect call. Ohio State was in man. The wide receiver motions to the left, baits the cornerback, and Edwards is running in that direction. That was perfect. But that game, and maybe 2021 versus Penn State, where Michigan ends up winning by 4. It's on a long crossing route. Again, perfectly called play, but Penn State's defenders ran into each other. That's why Eric All got that touchdown pass. So there's so much gray area. And this is what sucks, because you'll get Michigan fans who say this meant nothing. Michigan would have done everything that they did the previous 2 seasons without Stallions, which is not factually correct. It isn't. It is not. I am going to come to the table and say that Michigan probably has one less Big Ten championship. I don't know about playoff appearances, though, because I think an 11-1 Michigan that still likely plays Ohio State close in 2022 probably gets in as the 4th seed, while Ohio State is the 2 seed in 2021. Ironically, that might have been a better ending, because maybe Michigan loses to Ohio State but sneaks in. Therefore, they're not arrogant against TCU, and they go 13-1 and win it all but lose to Ohio State. I would have taken that. I don't know. This is frustrating, because then you get the other side where people who, hate Michigan, they're just as biased as the Michigan fan is, say, well, Michigan would have went 8-4 or 9-3. They would have only went 10-3 if not for Stallions. Well, I don't think that's accurate either, because Michigan clearly, from 2020 to 2021, there was clearly a physical change in the team. There was an attitude change. There were different schematics in general, not just adjusting play calls from Stallions, but I don't know. This is so hard to process. The only thing I can say is the truth is typically somewhere in the middle. Michigan had an unfair advantage. They need to be fined for that. They need to be penalized. There needs to be some sort of punishment. There has to be. There's a reason they did this, because it gave some kind of competitive advantage. It obviously did. If Michigan scouted all 8 of the Ohio State games that Stallions was planning to send scouts to, well, of course, then Michigan would be expected to hang half 100 on Ohio State. They know every darn set, every formation, every possible outcome. At that point, you basically should hack into Ohio State's headset. You still have to execute the play. You still have to have the better trained athlete. And that's where I think Michigan, what people are missing about Michigan is Michigan still was the physically better and tougher team than, I'd say, Ohio State in the previous 2 seasons. It just helped them additionally to have those extra plays. But that could change the course of the game, because, again, 4th quarter, Michigan's only ahead by 4. And it took Ohio State shooting themselves in the foot and being over-emotional, a.k.a. the G. Scott unsportsmanlike, that probably prevented them from taking advantage of a few good field position drives and, going back and gaining a lead. Thank you very much, Chris Lane. Thank you very much for the $2, the super chat. I appreciate your support. I still want that 11-0 versus 11-0 on November 25th. So until then, go Buckeyes and go blue. That sounds weird to say in the same sentence, but thank you very much for the $2. In a few minutes, we'll begin to preview some games. I'm probably going to be going over every game for 10 to 15 minutes, those 3 games. And then if you can't stay for the whole stream, don't worry, because I'm probably going to splice up this live stream and release those 3 quick preview and prediction videos tomorrow. Michigate is worse than Watergate. Michigan was spying on opponents. It's like Watergate or the Bill Belichick Spygate. Between all the nuances and complicating factors involved in something like this, it's really difficult to measure how effective sign stealing is. I mean, yeah, I'd say it's anywhere from it gives you a decent advantage to a significant advantage. I don't think it gives minimal advantage. I mean, there have been too many coaches that come out, whether it's Mike Norvell, Matt Rule, Bob Stoops, who, I mean, treat this like a crime. So there is some kind of significant advantage to all of this. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Again, what makes me mad is I think for this year, and I think for the previous seasons too, I think it was unnecessary. I'm a Michigan fan. I've watched this team. I've PSA. I've picked Ohio State to beat my team 2 years in a row. 2021 was probably out of disbelief. I couldn't believe my team could win. I picked them to cover, though, and I picked Michigan to cover again in 2022. Just not win. Yeah, I mean, Michigan, for the previous 2 seasons, for even with, whether it's disbelief in 21 or Michigan being without their best player in 22, logically, the way I saw it, Michigan was never going to get blown out by Ohio State in 21 or 22. They were too physical and they had too many advantages. So I guess that's all to say that I don't think it was necessary. I think Michigan could, not saying they would, I think they could have done everything they did without this whole, counterintelligence, KGB operation that might have sabotaged more than just Michigan in Big Ten football games. It's just ridiculous. But my solution to all of this, my solution is win. Suspend Stallions, which has already been done, and go 15-0. Because if Michigan beats Penn State by double digits, Ohio State by double digits, if they go into the playoff and win the semifinal by double digits, maybe even win the Natty by double digits, then they're doing that without their supposed cheat code. And that sort of proves the point that, hey, yeah, they were caught. Yes, it was wrong. Yes, they did have an unfair advantage. But that unfair advantage diminishes over time because, people slowly change their signs week by week. The further along Michigan goes without Stallions, the more their unfair advantage decreases. And if they go 15-0 and win a national championship, maybe it isn't legit. Maybe there should be an asterisk behind it, but part of me thinks that would be kind of unquestionable, hey, this team's elite. But maybe I'm wrong. Let me know. Let me know what you think. Seriously. I mean, again, I'm a Michigan fan. Just is what it is. I try and be objective. You can never be perfectly objective, but I try my hardest. Maybe Michigan will cancel the Ohio State game again. Oh, no. No, because here's something else. I don't know if Ohio State fans... I know Ohio State fans have heard this. There's a rumor going around that Ryan Day hired a private investigator because he found out that we were illegally, having an advantage, and he was also, of course, mad that Michigan was beating him. So he hired a private investigator, and he blew Michigan up. You don't think Michigan fans with social media have seen those rumors? Part of this might actually be a good thing because I like intense rivalries. Imagine how intense this rivalry will be if it's revealed that Ryan Day busted Michigan's insider cheating. Imagine what that would do. I mean, the two locker rooms would be past the boiling point. It would be molten magma in the Michigan locker room. I don't think anyone is canceling anything between Michigan and Ohio State. Ryan Day, he's going to want to play this game. And Jim Harbaugh, it seems like he's going to coach the rest of the season, at least from what I hear. He's going to want to play in this game. I mean, Jim Harbaugh, come on. He's a guy who likes to always be right. And he's going to want to prove that, well, I can beat Ryan Day without science. Which is sort of an arrogance thing. Beetle. Let me try and understand what you're saying. Rationalizing and blaming teams for not beating a cheating team. I thought I just said earlier that there's a pretty good chance that Michigan loses to Ohio State. Like last year without those signs, because it was a close game in the fourth quarter. And Michigan had several advantageous calls in that game. Michigan has the biggest second half adjustments in recent memory. That's probably an indicator that, they're using that film live to make adjustments. I don't know. I think that the game is going to be 1 versus 2. I don't know. Beetle. I don't think that I'm sitting here. In fact, no. I know that I'm not sitting here and I'm saying that this doesn't affect anything. Because we don't know. Rather, what I'm saying is I don't think this was necessary for Michigan to go 12-2 in 21 and 13-1 or greater in 22. I don't think it was necessary. I really don't think that. And I think that Michigan, perhaps out of fear starting in 2021 that they wouldn't win, perhaps they turned to illicit and illegal methods. And now it's come back to bite them. So that's my thoughts, really. Sam, I love your channel. Of course, I'm a Buckeye fan. All this news actually makes me sad. I feel like the Big Ten was just starting to look really good with the Ohio State, Michigan controlling the top 5. Well, look, if Michigan beats Penn State and if the game's competitive or one team blows out the other, but then they do well in the postseason, I don't think that'll change much in the grand scheme of things, honestly. I mean, for Michigan, there will be penalties, but for Michigan, if what is currently a medium to best case scenario, if that occurs and the worst isn't all true, like the worst rumors that are out there that, Michigan was sabotaging games in other conferences, that the whole staff was involved, Michigan could probably get through this in the same way that Kansas basketball did. But I do think there will be a fine. I think vacated wins, I think there's a potential that will happen, even though I think it's unlikely. I think a fine, a suspension, I think a large fine and a suspension of Jim Harbaugh is what is most likely. A suspension in the future. And yeah, Beetle, I agree. That is a huge problem. That's why if the NCAA decides to vacate wins, I couldn't defend them not vacating wins from 21 to 22. I couldn't. I think I could defend them from vacating wins this year, at least from games moving forward, like November games onward. But I don't know. Iowa fans want to fire an entire officiating squad this week. Oh, yes. Well, my take on that, I'm probably being more unobjective in this take than I am in the Michigan-Ohio State take. Brian Ferentz deserved that loss being handed to him. He deserved it. You cannot run that dog sweat of an offense and expect to win football games. You can't do that. And also Zachary, this is other news. Other news on Michigan football. The FBI is involved with the Matt Weiss investigation. Whatever. I don't know. Michigan did win over recruits with false wins. The problem is, what games do you think Michigan doesn't win without Stallions? What games do you think Michigan doesn't win? I will tell you, watching every Michigan game and how they physically, like, they bullied their opponents. Bullying opponents isn't I know your plays thing. Bullying opponents means I'm physically tougher than you. 2022 OSU, maybe 2022 Illinois, because there were some questionable calls there. Michigan was down. They had to come back. Maybe 2022 Illinois. Maybe 2021 Penn State. That's 3 games. Again, those games are maybes because in all of those games, Michigan, outside of Illinois, Michigan really, in those 3 games, they were the physically tougher team than Ohio State in 2022, and they were the physically tougher team than Penn State in 2021. So those 3 games are important. Those are, by the way, Michigan loses all 3 of those games. They don't win a championship. They don't go to the playoff. They don't go to Indy. And Harbaugh might not even be here right now. Or he's not viewed as a top 10 head coach. I mean, those are big wins. So I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that it's bad. It's bad. But we shouldn't be acting that Michigan would be going 8-4 if, I mean, watch the games. I don't think these teams would have went 8-4, 9-3, or heck, especially for 2022, 10-2 without was Sergeant Stallone. I love that nickname from Valenti. But that's me. Penn State wants to fire whoever their coach is because they couldn't beat Michigan. Well, they can beat Michigan this year. They can. Games in Beaver Stadium. And if what people say about the sign stealing is true and that Michigan had to cheat to have any kind of success, then Penn State will likely beat us. If that's factual, then they will likely beat us. And I've been seeing comments like that Ohio State fans or Michigan fans are making excuses. Sam, I say this with absolute heart. You've done the best from what I've seen about staying even, but this will take a long time to process. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I appreciate your comments, Beetle. Can we change the subject, please, Sam? Yes. Okay. I've ranted for long enough. It's just factual. Sorry about that. I've been talking about this for about 30 or 40 minutes. Okay. So, ask me some questions, and then what I'll do is I will do preview and prediction segments for 3 games. Michigan State and Minnesota, Oklahoma versus Kansas, and Oregon versus Utah. And I'll try and spend 10, 15 minutes on each game. And then those will be released as micro videos tomorrow. By the way, check out my pinned comment if you want to support the channel. Get a Patreon membership. Buy team merchandise. We have t-shirts for every Big Ten team. So I encourage you to check out both of those. If you sign up as an All-American or Heisman patron, you do get bonus content. And as a Heisman patron, you get to suggest video content that you want me to produce that I'll either produce on Patreon or on YouTube. You get to make suggestions, ask personal questions, and get signed College Football with Sam memorabilia after 6 months of being a Heisman patron. My potential power, that ranking system that's constantly posted on Patreon, went 14-11 against the spread in Week 8, went 18-7 against the money line, including picking Miami, Baylor. It picked Miami and Baylor to pull out the upset. It did. What other games did it predict? Trying to see the ones where it predicted an upset. I think BYU. I think BYU wasn't favored. I think Texas Tech was picked to beat BYU, but I don't know. We picked some underdogs. Potential power did. Overall potential power, 64 and 50 against the spread on the year, 87 and 27 against the money line. This is through 5 weeks. through a similar process. I've considered adding in other inputs like ESPN's efficiency numbers or some other metrics, but I'm laying off of that for now. And thank you, Zachary, for the compliment. Thank you very much. Let's see this comment from Block. By the way, like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Do you think Michigan State takes a step up or step down in this coming game against Minnesota? I have no clue. I think they're going to play better against Minnesota because Minnesota's not the same team that Michigan is or Washington. But Michigan State looks like they've quit. I'm not kidding. Michigan State looks dead. Why would you try? I mean, at this point, redshirt as many people that you can. Well, okay, that's taking it too far. I'm gonna step that back. Program's dead until further notice. I mean, at this point, you're winning games for pure pride, and Michigan State doesn't have the talent. They don't have the motivation as a baseline, and then on top of that, they don't have the appropriate talent to even compete with a Minnesota because they've been developed so poorly. Thank you very much, SFS Inverted, for the $5 super chat. I really appreciate it. And by the way, Nathaniel Lathy, can James Madison claim a national title? Well, of course they can claim a national title. Whether it will be recognized or not is up for debate, but it looks like they're going 12-0. And I'll probably include them in my top 25 if they win one more game this week. Sam, you're not seeing the reality. It's going to be Iowa's elite offense versus Clemson in the national championship. You mean the national? You mean the D'Antonio's disease bowl? Like two head coaches who just can't adapt to save their life. Oh, you know what? Too, the loser of that game, Iowa versus Clemson, should have to play USC. USC's disgusting. Every time the Trojans lose, I laugh. My dad is a Spartan fan. I'm a Michigan fan. We watch USC games with the hope that they will lose. That's what bonds us in college football. USC's awful. They're awful. And by the way, Caleb Williams, if you are considering drafting him first overall, you have questions. He's quit on his team. Body language doesn't look good. I don't want to be disrespectful to him. I think he's very talented. Also, painting F Notre Dame, and F being the word that rhymes with duck. F Notre Dame, F Utah, and then you know what Utah does? Utah puts on their steel-toe boots and kicks you around like a soccer ball until the ball pops. And then they did it again this year. And then Alex Grinch's defense makes Bryson Barnes look like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, prime Lamar Jackson. It was so asinine. I remember the announcer said when Lincoln Riley chose to kick a field goal, well, Lincoln Riley will wager on his defense. I mean, wagering on an Alex Grinch defense is like trying to depend on... I can't even come up with an analogy for that. It's just so asinine. It's like trying to depend on America or the Soviet Union not building a nuclear arsenal in the Cold War. What are you doing? They could lose to Cal. Realistically, Cal can put up points. If they lose to Cal, you're probably going 6-6 and the team just quits, and then there's tons of questions entering next year. I don't know what's going on. I don't. He wants a partial ownership in the NFL, and then Aaron Rodgers also wanted that, except Aaron Rodgers done something in the league. I have a feeling you don't like Iowa or USC for some reason. It's not because of their programs. Surprise, it's not even because of their head coaches. It's because of their coordinators. Grinch is incompetent, yet he keeps a job. He who shall not be named, the prince of the Ferentz dynasty, Brian Ferentz, is incompetent. He still has a job. You take those two out of the equation, I have no problem with those teams. or coaches. I don't whatsoever. Like, even though I think what Lincoln Riley did, leaving Oklahoma that way, is kind of slimy, I don't hate Lincoln Riley. I don't hate Jimbo Fisher. I dislike how Jimbo Fisher handled Florida State. And I think he's super overrated, but I don't dislike him. Penn State fans think I dislike James Franklin. Well, I dislike his in-game coaching, but as a person, no. He seems entertaining. He cares about his players. He's led a pretty good culture. He's been a relatively clean guy. I mean, I don't know. I don't like stubbornness. I don't like consistency when you're being consistently trash. And that's what USC's defense is. And that's what Iowa's offense is. Seriously. I hope that Iowa, anything necessary to get Brian Ferentz out of there for the sake of Iowa fans. By anything necessary, I mean on the field, I mean in football. Don't take that any further than that. Same with Alex Grinch, a.k.a. the offense for Iowa and the defense for USC needs to lose as many games as possible so they cannot be brought back. Just my opinion. And Franklin, I think Franklin's a great coach. I think he's a good to great coach. He's just not elite. He isn't. But he's good. Anyone saying he's trash is incorrect. They're likely being hyperbolic. They're being humorous. But to seriously say that James Franklin's not a good head coach is factually incorrect. He's a good, great head coach. Okay. Ohio man. Dream Team, Mel Tucker, head coach. OC Brian Ferentz, DC Alex Grinch, recruiting analyst Connor Stallions. The team will still find ways to win against lower-level competition because... No. Despite knowing all of their opponents' plays, the team will still go 0-12 because they suck that badly. Okay. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm going to be on here for probably quite some time. There'll probably be multiple videos dropped tomorrow just because of, the 3 videos from today's stream that'll be sliced. Before we get in depth, oh, holy cow. I don't know. Is there an Alexander Liston? On this live stream? Because we got our first Heisman member, and that's something to celebrate. So Alexander Liston, thank you very much. Hey, Brownie College Football, I've been very good. James Franklin's play calling is absolutely atrocious, but he is a good head coach. James Franklin and Lincoln Riley are polar opposites, and it's the reason why they're both good, great head coaches, but not elite. If you combined James Franklin and Lincoln Riley's strengths, that's probably a Nick Saban level head coach. I'm not kidding you. James Franklin is the perfect locker room guy. He's the perfect recruiter. He knows how to put together a good staff, especially defensively. He's the perfect CEO. But he's a CEO that once he has to micromanage things, he's horrible. Like, he can manage the general things, can't manage the little gritty details. Can't call plays. Can't do it. Can't manage games. Lincoln Riley, on the other hand, elite play caller offensively. He can zone in on one position group, very focused on the micro. Elite quarterback developer, no question. Elite schemer offensively, no question. He's not a CEO. He can't build a staff. He has a hard time hiring and firing anyone. He can't bring in large recruiting classes or balanced recruiting classes. And, I mean, look, I think you're seeing it this year where he's finding out, as Colin Cowherd said, that USC's not Norman. It's not. You got to be engaged with the media, with the fan base. You can't be a control freak. You kind of have to flow down the lazy river, in one sense, with USC. You have to. Because watch when Washington comes to town, that stadium is partially empty. Because now that USC is no longer a playoff contender, people have lost interest. Watch. Just watch. Just watch. And Laith Musa, thank you for being on the channel and talking consistently. By the way, this guy, I took classes with him. Really, really awesome person to talk football with. And yeah, fun memories, honestly. Yeah, he does not look, he doesn't look like a good QB. He has a very high ceiling when it comes to his floor, very low floor. And this is going to be the last question that I answer, and then I'll answer more questions later tonight on this stream. But I'm going to take a little bit of a break. We'll get into preview and predictions like I promised. And then, yeah. Okay. Can Oklahoma go 13-0 and make the playoffs? Can they? Yes. Will they? No. But we'll get into that in a few minutes. Okay. All right. I'm going to take a break, quick water break. I will be right back. Right back. Okay, guys? I'll see you very quickly. That's weird. I'm trying to insert an ad, but it says I need to enable monetization. Oh, well. Oh, well. Okay. Don't know exactly what's going on. I'm hoping that, like, none of you are being boat raced by endless ads, but that might be the case. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. Let me try doing this. Let me try doing this really quick. Sorry about this, guys. Okay. Huh. This is weird. Okay. Well, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to sit here. I'm going to go get a water and then be back. I don't intend to drink. Okie dokie. I'm back. I did see that, oh, someone said it worked. Okay. Yeah, I don't know why that happened, but it is what it is. Okay. So we're back. I saw someone said quick vodka break. I'm not even 21 yet, nor do I intend to drink alcohol, but here we are. Okay, so this next part, I'm not going to be able to really answer the chat here, but these are games that I think we're interested in either from a Big Ten perspective or from, this is, college football playoff prove yourselves perspective in Oklahoma, Kansas, and Utah, Oregon. These are games that I think, the favorite who's on the road is only favored by 9 points or less, by single digits. I think these are intriguing games that have the potential to go either way. And yes, Hummus Hero, if you skip ads, that negates ad revenue, but I won't be mad at you for skipping ads because I do that for basically every other channel. And Nathaniel Lathis says YouTube Premium's the way to go. I do get a small amount of YouTube Premium revenue. How funny would it be if Ryan Day hired that private law firm? Well, if that's the case, then I hope Michigan beats Ohio State by 50 instead of 40. But that probably won't happen either way. As one Ohio State fan put it, either Ohio State wins close or Michigan dominates, just based off of how these two teams look. Or Michigan wins close. I think Michigan's the better team right now, but Ohio State is the more proven team. They've played a lot tougher of a schedule. They've beaten Penn State, Notre Dame. Their defense looks awesome. So I think the game is going to be elite this season. I really do. I think that it's going to be pretty incredible, to be quite frank. Will 8282. We did the Michigan update earlier in this video. Basically right now what's going on is the NCAA met with Michigan. I'm answering Will underscore 8282's comment. The NCAA met with Michigan today. It looks like that the truth is somewhere in the middle of Michigan fans and non-Michigan fans, that, you know, they cheated. It's bad, but it's not like running rampant through every assistant coach. That's basically what the update is as of today. When has Michigan ever beat Ohio State by 50? I don't think they have. I just hope that that would happen as a Michigan fan. But anyway, okay, we are going to get into this. Let me get out my phone so I can time myself. This is like the least professional stream ever, but streams are the time where people can see my face and interact with me instead of, you know, see my personal minimalist style videos. So, gonna check the chat one more time. Chimichanga, Stover. I think Stover could win the Mackey Award, absolutely. Elite tight end. James Yoder, from what I know, doesn't report very accurate information, and I bet you he was joking there, Hummus Hero. Just information, I guess. I also think adding mics to helmets would be a good, appropriate thing to do to prevent sign stealing. That's another question that someone asked. Someone by the name of Colby Vlash. Thank you for being on the channel very, very much. Okay. Sam, can you wear an OSU jersey if OSU wins it all? If Ohio State's playing in the national championship on specific conditions, I will be rooting for them to win it. Again, specific conditions. So there's a maybe to that because I will be live reacting to the national title. Same with Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State versus Michigan. The Big Ten, I might do the Big Ten championship game, I don't know. But I'll be live reacting to the semifinal games, a New Year's Six game that the Big Ten's involved in, the national championship, and the remaining top 10 games in the Big Ten. That being Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, Michigan. I will be live reacting and analyzing those games like we did for Penn State and Ohio State, that same exact format, which got nearly 20,000 views. So hopefully we can get like 50,000 views for the game. That'd be very much awesome. Okay, now let's get into this. So let's talk about Oklahoma. So this matchup between Kansas and Oklahoma, this is just because I am going to be, you know, releasing this in video format, even though my hair is like, you know, crazy and, you know, gosh, don't even like know how to get the, you know, direction on all this like correct. But yeah, my green screen isn't perfected, but it's much better than it was. Okay. So Kansas versus Oklahoma, this is a potential college football playoff. This game is college football playoff implications is what I'm trying to say. Kansas is the home team. This game will be played in David Booth, Kansas Memorial Stadium. Oklahoma is wildly favored by ESPN's FPI, who has them as the fourth best team in the country, and they give them an 87.4% chance to win. Oklahoma is favored by 9 points according to Vegas, and a lot of people are betting that Kansas is not only going to cover, but a lot of people are taking Kansas money line. So that is, in my mind, partly a red flag for an upset here. Like, my intuition tells me that... along with some other games, that it's more likely Wisconsin beats Ohio State, for example, than Oklahoma losing this game to Kansas, just based off of where the bets are being placed. I mean, there's a lot of bets, probably a lot of money, too, on Kansas pulling this out. Potential power, my power ranking system that you can, again, check in my Patreon page via the link in my video description. Potential Power is only picking Oklahoma to win by 6. So Potential Power likes Kansas a lot. Kansas is a top 25 team according to Potential Power. And Oklahoma is not even top 10. Oklahoma's top 15 in Potential Power. Kansas is top 25. And the home field advantage also plays a role in Kansas covering this game according to Potential Power. I look here, and Oklahoma looked sketchy against UCF. They've let Iowa State and Cincinnati and other schools drive up and down the field on them. The win against Texas looks less impressive the more that Texas plays. Oklahoma, I think, is probably one of the more overrated undefeated teams, but that's just my opinion. And I thought that Texas was going to beat Oklahoma, full disclosure, and I was wrong. However, I don't think my intuition and analysis of Oklahoma overall is incorrect. There are holes in this team. Dillon Gabriel is not a perfect quarterback. Jeff Lebby is not an elite offensive coordinator. Oklahoma struggles to run the football, and they struggle to stop the run. UCF is a team that with John Rice Plumlee can run the football with their quarterback and their running back. They can do that. Guess who can do that? If Jalen Daniels is healthy? Kansas. Kansas can do that. Kansas can even do that to a more limited degree if Jason Bean is healthy. Jason Bean has 9 passing touchdowns on the year, 2 interceptions. Gabriel has 19 passing touchdowns with 3 interceptions. Kansas is running for over 212 yards per game. Now, Oklahoma did limit Texas's run game to a good degree. However, I wonder, honestly, if Kansas has the better rushing attack. I do. Kansas puts up 443 yards per game on offense. Oklahoma allows 359.9 yards on defense. That's not even 50 yards less than Kansas's defense. And Kansas, from a yards perspective, has a better pass defense than even Oklahoma does. But I anticipate that's because you can run on Kansas. Kansas does not have an impressive defensive line. And consequentially, I think that teams opt to run on the Jayhawks, much like Texas did, where they had over 300 rushing yards, rather than pass on them. That's also how Oklahoma State beat them, as Oklahoma State was able to run on the Jayhawks, and therefore Alan Bowman was able to fling it all around the field. Kansas, they're an offensive team. They don't have a whole lot of defense, if any defense. But with Jalen Daniels, their offense is nearly unstoppable. Right now, Kansas, I forget what statistic it was. Maybe it was points per play. I don't know exactly what it was, but I think it was... No. I know exactly what statistic this was. Kansas, when you look at total offense and when you look at yards per play, Kansas is 7th nationally in yards per play. They have 6.8 yards per play in their last 3 games. They've averaged 7.1 yards per play. At home, they average 7 yards per play. Overall, Kansas has more yards per play than Michigan, Florida State, Texas, Missouri, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, North Carolina, Ohio State. There are only 6 teams that average more yards per play than Kansas. Washington, duh. LSU, also duh. Oregon, USC, that's another duh moment. UCF, who played Oklahoma within 2, and Georgia. A lot of that due to Brock Bowers, and also the fact that Georgia is a very effective team with play action. Very effective. I look at this game, I think that Oklahoma has the better defense. They have the better defensive linemen, linebackers, defensive backs. I think that Kansas, there's a lean toward them at special teams. I think that Kansas does have the better offensive line. And I think that they also have the better running back room. Quarterback, due to health, I have to give to Oklahoma with Dillon Gabriel and Jackson Arnold. Dillon Gabriel has 2,131 passing yards, 19 passing touchdowns, and only 3 interceptions. And has an 87.6 quarterback efficiency rating, which is 4th nationally. He has 230 rushing yards. He's averaging 4.3 yards per carry, and he has 5 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he is a great player. Really great player. And he has experience. He's been a starting quarterback since 2019. He has great experience, intuition, wisdom. He doesn't have, elite physical traits exactly, like especially arm strength, but he's accurate, still has a relatively strong arm, and he could win the Heisman in the offense that he runs and with the efficiency that he's been producing at. Meanwhile, Jason Bean and Devin Neal are players that I'm looking at for Kansas. Jason Bean, I'm going to have to assume that he's starting for now. 913 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, a 66.6 quarterback efficiency rating. A 173 passer rating, though, and he's averaging nearly 10 yards per pass attempt. He has 91 rushing yards. Devin Neal has 659 rushing yards, averaging 7.3 yards per carry, and he has 6 rushing touchdowns. Kansas on the season, again, electric offense. They're averaging 5.6 yards per carry on the ground, 9.5 yards per pass attempt. Overall, looking at this game, I'm picking Kansas to pull the upset, and I would not advise anyone else to do so. My intuition tells me that Oklahoma's going to come in here and win big. That's part of my intuition. Another part of me thinks that Oklahoma is just not going to go 13-0. I don't think so. I think that whether it's Cincinnati, whether it's UCF, whether it's even Texas, when Texas was playing their C-plus game, and Oklahoma nearly let the game get away from them until Texas decided to go prevent, which was just asinine. And then UCF. Against any kind of offense, this Oklahoma defense can be vulnerable. Against UCF's offense with a quarterback with mobility, and also Gus Malzahn, who's just extremely creative. Also, Kansas has nothing to lose. Texas in that Red River shootout game, Red River rivalry, Texas had everything to lose. Everything. So you call the game differently. Kansas, this is their time to secure bowl eligibility. This is their time to re-enter the top 25. I have them in my top 25 right now. If Kansas wants to contend for a conference championship, which is possible if they win this game, you got to win here. There's so many things that Kansas still has in their grasp, but they have 2 losses. And if you're Kansas and you're Lance Leipold, and if you're anyone on that Kansas roster, you know that in theory you aren't as talented or as big or as athletic as Oklahoma is. But you may have more fight. And I guarantee you that you have the better offensive coordinator in Andy Kotelnicki. You have home field advantage. That place is going to be full. It'll probably be one of the louder times in David Booth Memorial Stadium, which isn't, saying a whole lot. It's not a big stadium. But I think Kansas right here is going to pull off the upset and win 38-35. And this is with, my pick is still with Jason Bean at quarterback. If Jalen Daniels was guaranteed to start, my intuition would be telling me that this is probably closer to the correct pick. But with uncertainty at quarterback, my intuition's telling me Jason Bean isn't the same quarterback. He's good. He's great. He's more mistake prone. He isn't as mature. He's not as good of a scrambler or improviser. I think that Kansas may need that to beat Oklahoma, but there's the other side of this where Oklahoma, as a football team, I think is destined to lose a game. And whether that's to Kansas or Oklahoma State or in the Big 12 championship game or 2 out of the 3, I think that Oklahoma's practically a lock to reach the Big 12 championship game. Even more of a lock than Texas, just given the fact that they have an easier schedule. Texas already has a loss, etc. I think Oklahoma is going to slip up somewhere. I don't think that they're a national championship contender. Next year, with the recruiting that Brent Venables is doing and the job that he's doing, yeah, probably. But I think at some point, this team is going to be revealed as a team that is not a true top 5, top 6 top 8 team. I don't think Oklahoma is elite. To be in the top 4, to be in the college football playoff, you typically have to be elite, have an easy schedule, or be extremely clutch, or be near elite. I think Oklahoma is very little, if any, of all of those things. So again, Kansas, 38, Oklahoma, 35. Look out for Dylan Gabriel. Look out for whoever starts at Kansas for quarterback. Look out for Devin Neal at running back. And defensively, look out for Peyton Bowen, elite safety, true freshman, I do believe, for the Sooners. Look out for him. He'll I think against this offense, it'll be very important for him to step up, not just as a blitzer like he has, but also in coverage. And he's been good just about everywhere. So those are some players to look out for. Up next, let's talk about pardon me. Let's talk about Michigan State traveling to Minnesota. Michigan State's 2-5, and Minnesota's 4-3. Both teams have a negative point differential. Both do. Minnesota's scoring around 20 points per game. They've allowed 24 points per game. And Michigan State's scoring around 18 points per game, and they've allowed about 27 points per game. I think Minnesota right now is peaking. I think that for them to go on the road and beat Iowa in a very close emotional game is a sign that, they're clutch, that PJ Fleck has not plateaued as a head coach, or at least he's not hit his ceiling exactly. And this Minnesota team lost a ton of production from last year. I thought they were going to practically reload, given the good strength and conditioning they have, the physicality, and also the way they use the portal. But oh, how I was wrong. They lost to North Carolina in a game where it was UNC's red zone efficiency and Ethan Kaliakmanis's and Cole Kramer's inaccuracy that decided that game. Minnesota choked a big lead to Northwestern, which you can see in how their defense performed the following few weeks. That definitely left a psychological impact on the team. And they got blown out by Michigan. But hey, any program that isn't great at this point, I think, would get blown out by Michigan and lose by 30 or 40 points. That's just how good Michigan is. Michigan State, on the other hand, the only thing they share really with Minnesota is that negative point differential. The fact that I thought they would be better than they're playing right now. That was one of my worst preseason picks of the year, is that Michigan State would have been a fringe top 25, potentially top 20 football team. That was my worst. That's probably my worst pick. Worst of the season, if I'm being honest, was picking Michigan State to do well. And you can see with Michigan State, if you watch their games, you can see that they have potential. They really do. But all in all, they didn't have the head coach to put it all together in Mel Tucker. Mel Tucker didn't hire the correct staff to train these guys. Strength and conditioning for Michigan State really starting last year was extremely questionable with all the injuries that they had, and just the lack of toughness and the fact that the team constantly quit and you were able to run the football in Michigan State. That's a sign of, weakness. And trench play wasn't good, tons of injuries, and the offensive line was horrendous. This year, Mel Tucker was suspended and later fired after 2 games for a sexual harassment allegation, which Michigan State ruled him guilty of. Mel Tucker's appealing that, but that's a whole mess. We're not going to talk about it. This game, Michigan State's 2-5. If they have any juice left, they have to unleash it here, because Minnesota is coming off of an emotional win. I said this in the preseason. This is probably the only thing about my preseason predictions for Minnesota, or more so Michigan State, that could still be right. I said that the Michigan State-Illinois stretch for Minnesota, that's a trap spot. That's a spot where after that Iowa game, which I predicted to be a win for Minnesota in the preseason, that was a preseason prediction that because of Darius Taylor's health, I wavered on, although I did say that if Darius Taylor started, they would win, and indeed they did. As one thing about the preseason I got right was that PJ Fleck would, in fact, beat Iowa, finally, mainly because of Brian Ferentz's offense, but whatever. This is a letdown spot for Minnesota. It really is. And for Michigan State, this is our rival just humiliated us and caused the worst loss in Michigan State Stadium history. It's time to be mad, or it's time to lay down and finally die. That's what you're going to see from Michigan State. They are either going to give this game their all, or they're going to quit. That's what's going to happen. And the Golden Gophers are given a 66.4% chance to win, according to FPI. Michigan State, they're given a decent chance by FPI. That's factoring in home field advantage, by the way. Michigan State's either going to try their hardest and probably escape with a win or come very close. And if they come very close but still lose, they'll probably quit the following week. Or they're going to quit right here. Potential Power doesn't care if Michigan State is going to play an inspired effort or not. Potential Power thinks Minnesota is a top 25 team that really just hasn't come together yet. That's what Potential Power views Minnesota as. They view Potential Power, my model, views Minnesota as a team with top 20 potential that hasn't gelled together yet. But when they gel together, they'll be a very extremely dangerous team. And Potential Power, as the name implies, again, check the link down in the description if you want, Potential Power picks for games, to see my Potential Power rankings. All of that's on Patreon if you're an All-American or a Heisman patron. Minnesota, as the Potential Power suggests, Potential Power often measures the potential of a team. Minnesota has Daniel Jackson. They have Corey Crooms. They have Darius Taylor. They have Sean Tyler. Ethan Kaliakmanis has a high ceiling as a quarterback. Minnesota's offensive line has, guys like Tyler Cooper, Quinn Carroll. This is off the top of my head. Nathan Bowie. That's the interior of the offensive line. And the tackles are really the newest players, so I don't know them quite as well. But Minnesota's averaging 4.1 yards per carry after, facing a tough Nebraska defense that it's hard to run on them unless you're an elite offense. And they faced an Iowa defense that's extremely stout. They were able to run for 3 yards per carry on them. Minnesota's weakness is their passing attack. They're only averaging 5.7 yards per attempt in the passing game, and they're only completing 52% of their passes. And they have more interceptions thrown on the year than touchdowns. It's not good. Minnesota's passing game isn't. But the one bright spot there is Daniel Jackson. Brevin Spanford's having a tough year. Same with Nick Callerup. Corey Crooms is 227 receiving yards, no receiving touchdowns. Daniel Jackson has 29 receptions, 387 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. And he had 100, almost said 500. He had 100 receiving yards against Iowa. Daniel Jackson is a great wide receiver. Michigan State, the Spartans, all they really have in my mind is Nathan Carter. Really. I mean, Hauser's better than Kim, but Hauser's younger and doesn't have the same starting experience that Kaliakmanis does, and he has an even worse supporting cast. Carter, I think, is a player that even without a great supporting cast, he can still make plays, especially against a Minnesota defense that has been rather discombobulated. He has 565 rushing yards, averaging 4.3 yards per carry, and he has 4 receiving touchdowns, on top of 80 receiving yards on 12 receptions. So he's also involved in the passing game. Jonathan Kim's a player to watch. 7 field goals made, 9 field goals attempted with a long of 58, and he's 12 of 12 in extra points. Jonathan Kim's another player to look out for, because this game could come down to a lot of field goals being kicked. And it's the same with Minnesota's Dragan Kesich, who's 14 of 16 on field goals, long of 54. His only misses are from 40 yards or more, and he's also 100% on extra points. Dragan Kesich could end up being, the Big Ten or national kicker of the year, making almost 90% of his field goals, having a long of more than 50, and making 100% of his extra points. A big difference, too, in these teams, we talked about potential, especially offensively. Michigan State also has an underrated wide receiver core. Defensively is where the depth and the potential really is different. Both teams have 15 sacks. Both do. However, Minnesota's defense is only 392 tackles. Michigan State is 488. Michigan State's defense has a very tough time getting off the field. Minnesota's not exactly. They at least have some boom and not just only bust to their defense. Minnesota, the Golden Gophers, have 21 pass deflections, 9 interceptions, 5 forced fumbles. Michigan State only has 1 forced fumble. They have 6 interceptions, and they have 25 passes defended. So the Spartans, their secondary's not good. Their tackling isn't good. They love to tackle with their bodies, trying to hit players to get them to the ground. Very poor defense, one of the worst in the nation. Another Scotty Hazelton defense. For Michigan State, I just really have a hard time winning this football game. Now, I think that Scotty Hazelton employs a bend but don't break scheme. That's probably going to be the only thing that saves Minnesota from finally earning a positive point differential in this game, but I think Minnesota will dominate. Michigan State, by nature of the fact that Hauser has a good arm, he's much more accurate than Kim, Carter can make some plays, and whether it's Monterey Foster Jr. or Trey Mosley or Malik Carr, Malik Carr has just looked completely uninspired this season. I thought him and Brevin Spanford were going to have great years, and both of them are having very rough performances. Michigan State has talent on offense. Minnesota has been suspect on defense. And I think as a result, Michigan State will get a few points, probably touchdowns. Michigan State will either score or they will have a 3-and-out or perhaps a turnover. I mean, that will be the variation of the drive success for Michigan State. I think Minnesota will be much more consistent offensively and defensively. Wouldn't be shocked, though, if Michigan State is able to play this game closer, because Michigan State can stop the run. They love to blitz. They did that against Michigan, and they were able to limit Michigan's ground game, but then they couldn't stop Michigan's passing attack. And again, they could only limit Michigan's ground game. And, they lost 49-0. Minnesota does not have the same passing attack, but they will be able to get big plays with Kaliakmanis' arm and the fact that I expect Daniel Jackson to just be wide open on practically every play against this horrid secondary. The question is, how accurate can Kaliakmanis be? And Michigan has a better offensive line and a better running back room than Minnesota. So is there a chance that Michigan State shuts down Minnesota's run game? Yes. I don't think that'll happen, though. I think that Minnesota will run for perhaps close to 200 yards, and they will stubbornly, while chewing clock and perhaps having a few 3-and-outs, they will stubbornly run the football until Michigan State's defense just breaks. This could be a tied game at the half, or maybe, dare I say it, Michigan State's ahead at the halftime, but I'm stumbling over my words here. It's kind of weird. Minnesota will pull away. I think Minnesota wins. I think Minnesota covers. I think Michigan State's already quit to a large degree, and I think this is going to be, once again, another nail in a coffin that's already sealed, and the corpse has already been mummified. So that's game number 2. Finally, game number 3. Let's talk about Utah, who's just coming off a big win against USC. Let's talk about them hosting Oregon. Oregon's given a 68.7% chance to win according to FPI. Rice-Eccles Stadium, the Utah Utes haven't lost in Rice-Eccles Stadium, not counting the COVID year. I don't think they've lost in that stadium since 2018. They have a very impressive home game win streak. Kyle Whittingham's a top 4 head coach in all of college football. His staff is top 4 in all of college football. They're extremely efficient. I mean, look at Sione Vaki, one of the better safeties in college football, being converted to a running back and also being utilized out of the backfield as a receiver, and how seamless his transition seemed. Bryson Barnes played the game of his life. I know it was against USC's defense, but nonetheless, he still showed that he has some upside to him. Very impressive performance by Utah. And their only loss is to an Oregon State team who I think is top 10 and who I think is one of the 5 best offenses in the country. Yes, Oregon State is that good offensively. I think we can all say, looking back on it, that loss to Washington State was a fluke. Washington State ran a genius offense and unfortunately was figured out, and now they're probably going to struggle to go bowling. They'll probably make one, but they'll finish 7-5, 6-6, probably. Maybe even worse. Maybe they miss the bowl game. I don't know. I don't know what their schedule is outside of the fact that they have yet to face Washington, who will probably pound them, but that's beside the point. We're talking about Utah and Oregon here. Oregon, meanwhile, Dan Lanning, I think, is a great coach. The problem with Dan Lanning is he's uber aggressive. He's very stubborn. A friend has told me that he comes across as a jerk. Now, the latter part doesn't have much to do with winning football games, but what I'm tying that to is the fact that Dan Lanning likes to do what Dan Lanning wants to do, and that got him in trouble against Washington, and I could totally see it getting him in trouble again in this game against a much more competent defense. And while Rice Eccles isn't as loud as Husky Stadium, the fan base of Utah is typically more engaged and more passionate than the fan base of Washington, from what I know. I mean, I've seen multiple games of the Huskies where their stadium is not full. Meanwhile, Utah stadium seems to be always full, fan base always engaged, and I imagine Utah is going to maybe wear a different uniform, or they're going to do something special for this game, because if Utah wins this game, there's a very good chance, given how Washington's looked, given the fact that, Colorado at the end of the year is probably a good win for Utah. Utah's playoff hopes are alive if they win. And for Oregon, they're dead if they lose, but they're alive if they win, and Utah's hopes are dead. This is a playoff elimination game. In one sense, you could say that this is the semifinal to the playoff semifinals. You could say that. Oregon's favored by 6.5, according to Vegas. And then when you take a look at potential power favors Oregon to win by 9. It predicts Oregon to win by 9. Pardon me. Again, last time I'm going to mention it, check out potential power via the link in the description by joining my Patreon as an All-American or Heisman. My potential power rankings will be posted tomorrow, and I'm going to try and get game day picks for Saturday's games either out Friday night or early Saturday morning. So check that out via the link in the description. And also like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment your prediction for this game down below in the chat and in the comment section. Thank you very much. I think some players to look out for Utah, I would say look on the interior of their defensive line. The interior of Utah's defensive line struggled mightily this year. It did. And it has. They are allowing right now 78 rushing yards per game, but I don't think that tells the whole story, because against Oregon State and against USC, they were gashed on the ground. Marshawn Lloyd had 7 carries for 86 yards. The issue is you have to have a good running back, a great running back, or a great offensive line, or both, to run on Utah, because Utah's defense is just that fundamentally sound that they're not going to let anyone run the football on them. But I'm telling you that 78 rushing yards allowed, same with Oregon, 95 rushing yards allowed, both of those run defenses are puffed to the brim. The beer, as an analogy, only 1/3 of the cup is full of actual beer, the rest is foam. These are overinflated running defenses. They just are. Now, that doesn't mean that both teams are going to run for 300 on each other and, control the clock, because I also think that both offenses, when functioning at peak capacity, are really, really, really good. For Oregon, I look at the Ducks, and their offense is one of the best in the country. 553 passing yards, or total yards per game, pardon me. They allow just over 300 yards, 312.6. Utah allows under 300 yards per game, but they only have 345 yards per game on offense. Again, like I mentioned, when they function at peak efficiency, Utah does have a good offense, but they haven't functioned at peak efficiency very often because Cameron Rising hasn't played all year, and he's not going to play for the rest of the season. He's going to be redshirted and either return next year or head into the transfer portal. But if Bryson Barnes, and I think Nate Johnson's injured, I don't know. If Bryson Barnes can play like he did against USC in this game, have an inspired performance, I think he definitely gained confidence against the Trojans. I think in this game, there's a large potential that Oregon could be in trouble here. At the same time, though, Potential Power thinks that Oregon is going to win, Oregon is going to cover, and a lot of that stems from the fact that Oregon has, Troy Franklin, Bucky Irving, Bo Nix, Jackson Powers Johnson, who I think is the second best center behind Cedric Van Pran in all of college football. For Utah, if they want to win this game, what's going to have to happen is their defense is going to have an amazing performance. They're going to have to force turnovers. They have 7 interceptions, 7 forced fumbles, 25 passes deflected, 25 sacks. They're going to have to step up. They will. Junior Tafanu, he's going to have a great day. Logan Fano, going to have a great day. Jonah Ellis, going to have to continue to perform at a high level. He right now is 10 sacks. He's going to need to have a handful of sacks against Oregon for the Utah Utes to come out on top. Cole Bishop, 2 picks. Lander Barton, who's unfortunately out for the season. Utah's just dealt with so many injuries, but yet they continue to reload. They continue to retool. And bringing in Sione Vaki and having him play against USC, the seamless transition that he made there, he's only going to get better and fit more within the offense the longer the season goes on. For context about these passing offenses, Bryson Barnes has a 126.3 passer rating on the year. With 633 passing yards, he's averaging 7.1 yards per pass attempt, 4 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and on the ground, Utah's averaging 4.2 yards per rush with 11 rushing touchdowns and 1,283 rushing yards. Oregon, meanwhile, the Ducks are so much more successful. Bo Nix has over 2,000 passing yards. Bo Nix has 19 passing touchdowns, only 1 interception, a 180.2 passer rating. He's completed 78.4% of his passes. The Ducks are averaging 6.8 yards per carry with 21 rushing touchdowns. They have 1,588 rushing yards. And I think Oregon, statistically, from a yards per play aspect, from a total yards aspect, from an explosive play aspect, probably from, the EPA metrics, is probably going to be the more impressive team in this game. And I think they're going to win. I do, because Utah, offensively, I think they're going to have an inspired effort. I think that Oregon's defense is a little overrated, and I think Utah's defense, rather, is a little underrated. However, I don't think that Utah has enough capacity offensively to come out and win. I think if they had Cameron Rising, if they had Brant Kuthi, if they had Lander Barton, if they had those players healthy, I'd pick Utah to win in a heartbeat. But I think that Utah is going to cover. In fact, my intuition tells me that this is going to be a close game. Part of me thinks that Utah will win, but Oregon is just so much more efficient offensively. I think that at the end of the day, this will be probably another game where we look at Dan Lanning's game management, and there are probably some questionable calls. I expect Oregon to be aggressive here, being it's on the road against a one-loss team and against a defense that Lanning's going to want to wear down. And I think that Utah will stop multiple fourth down attempts by Dan Lanning. The problem is, unlike Washington, I don't think Utah has the offense to capitalize on that. I don't think they do. I think if Oregon in this game, this is me kind of making an advanced prediction here. I think what, in retrospect, what we'll talk about in this game is if Oregon was just willing to not put its head in the sand and go for it on every fourth down, this game wouldn't, it would be over by the middle of the fourth quarter. Like, Oregon would have a double-digit lead, Utah would be out of character, and maybe Oregon's defense forces a turnover. I think Kyle Whittingham's superior game management, his experience as a head coach compared to Dan Lanning's youth and energy, I think that brings this game closer than what would typically occur, especially being that this is on a neutral. This isn't on a neutral field. This is at Utah. This is not at Autzen Stadium. This is not in Las Vegas. There will be crowd noise. Road Bo Nix, he did well against Washington, but he's still suspect. And I think that Utah does have a better defense than Washington. So we'll see how well Bo Nix does. I expect Oregon to surrender a turnover. They'll probably fail on, I think, 2 fourth downs. But I think their run game, their passing offense, I think every time that Utah doesn't stifle them on 4th down or get an early 3 and out, Oregon probably scores on that drive. I think that Utah will settle for field goals. I think they'll force, again, a few stops, probably collect 1. I'd actually lean toward 2 turnovers. That's partially why they stay in this game, I think, is they get either a few sacks, maybe a strip sack, more likely than not an interception or 2, maybe a forced fumble. They've been good at getting turnovers. They get those in Oregon territory. Utah, I think, will win the field position battle, but Oregon will come out on top. That's just my opinion, though, and much like the Oklahoma-Kansas game, this is going outside of Big Ten territory, so don't take my full word for it. I don't have much confidence in this pick, but I think I know more about Oregon and Utah than I do Oklahoma and Kansas, and I sense that this is going to be a close game. Okay. Well, that's that in regards to, preview, prediction. What did y'all think? I see that there are 39 of you still on here. So, all right. Let me see. What's the chat talking about? Utah 683. Oregon 0. Yeah, all of them are Bo Nix pick sixes. I see a lot of people are picking Utah to win. Oregon-Utah game is probably going to be better than Washington-Oregon. That's very hard, but I could see that happening. I could see that happening. I could. There'd have to be plenty of turnovers, though. The only way it can be a better game than Washington-Oregon is if Oregon makes a comeback on the road late, the same way Alabama did against Auburn in 2021, or if Utah wins in the most Iowa fashion just by swarming. Here's how Utah could win. Utah could replicate the same game plan that, let's say, Iowa did against Penn State in 2021. They could do that, where they hang around for just long enough, get turnovers, their defense plays the best game of their whole season, and eventually Oregon mentally cracks under pressure. I think that's possible. Is it likely? I'm going to say no. Washington-Oregon was a top tier game. It was. Aryam Amin, I'm going to talk a little bit about Nebraska-Purdue tomorrow, actually, in a video that I will be recording tomorrow that is going to talk about can they win the Big Ten West? That's what that video is going to be about, and that'll be released tomorrow. There will also be a Rutgers video probably released Saturday talking about their bowl eligibility and discussing a little bit about like what they're going to prepare for over the bye week in my mind. And if you're a Michigan or Ohio State fan, I don't know if it'll be tomorrow, but starting next week when the college football playoff rankings are released, there will be a weekly video dedicated to the game and doing way too early previews and reactions for both teams, only talking about the game. Because Michigan, Ohio State, they have the biggest presence of any fan base on this channel. I'm a Michigan fan, but I think, as we all know, I'm a Michigan fan with admiration for Ohio State. In fact, I have an affinity to a large degree for the Buckeyes. And the reason for that being is they're successful. Their offense is something that I am in love with, at least in the traditional sense from 2019 to 2022. I do not like this year's Ohio State offense. So I think it's appropriate to dedicate to the game. What? Virginia Tech is up 30-3 over Syracuse. What? Well, Dino Babers is getting fired. I think I predicted that in the preseason, too. And Virginia Tech, with all the momentum they have, they only have, I think they only have one conference loss. Could Virginia Tech reach the ACC championship game? This is why you gotta love college football. It can be toxic in the best of ways at times. It really can. Ever since Oregon beat OSU, I have nothing but hatred for Oregon. Hey, the same coach that forgot to take a knee to win the game beat Ryan Day. Just process that for a minute. Shows that, it's in the same way that Kevin Sumlin beat Nick Saban. It's all about matchups and certain things that are done. Doesn't mean Kevin Sumlin's a better head coach than Nick Saban. He's not, but he earned that win. He got it because he had Johnny Manziel, he had Cliff Kingsbury, and, Kevin Sumlin, in the same way as Mario Cristobal, they're head coaches of power. They were head coaches of Power 5 teams. You got to be a good coach to be, the head man of a Power 5 organization. You just have to. My gosh. Michigan is done, wins vacated for the past 5 years. No, I gotta see that to believe it. Gotta see it to believe it, honestly. Let me know, you can ask more questions, but I'm gonna get off here shortly because I have to pack. Tell me what you think of, let me know what you think of those short previews. Like, would you watch those and be entertained if I released them the following day? Would you? It's an interesting question. Let me know what you think. Gosh, the chat was very active when I was talking. It was. Okay. Okay, SFS inverted would. Nathaniel Lathy would. How do you lose to Fresno State at home? Ask that of Purdue. Well, I think Budnick, he might be referring to Budnick. I don't know. How much have you seen from Urban today? The drop-off. I'm going to go with SFS inverted here and say that Day has made the program better. This is difficult. It's difficult because Urban Meyer could win the big games, but he only won one national title. And people are going to see that and be like, whoa, like disrespect to Urban. No, Urban's an elite head coach. The point is, when you lose to Brian Ferentz, like 55 to I think 24 was the score of that 2017 game. When you get wrecked by Oklahoma on your own home field. When you have to slug your way through Michigan, Wisconsin, and an overrated USC team in your bowl game. And the following year, you get aced by Purdue. You have to have a dropped 2-point conversion pass to have a chance of reaching Indianapolis. I don't think Urban Meyer would have beaten 2021 Michigan. or 2022 OS or 2022 Michigan. I don't think that would have happened. I think Ryan Day has built Ohio State to be better. I think the problem for Ryan Day is he's faced Michigan teams that, like, taking out the cheating, like looking at just from a physical point of, looking at Michigan teams from a physical point of view and skill, not get, well, no, we can look at it from game management too, because even without, cheating, for example, Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter would be better DCs than Don Brown was in his later tenure. I mean, Don Brown was an awful DC in the final 2 years and bad in 2018 in big games. And in 2017, you saw the vulnerability for big games, whether it was against Penn State or Ohio State. I think that Day just has the unfortunate reality of facing the two, and probably this year, the three best Michigan teams of this century. I think 21, 22, and 23 Michigan are all better than 2016 Michigan. 2016 Michigan being the best Michigan team that Urban Meyer ever had to play. I think all Urban Meyer teams, this right here is a prediction that may rub some Ohio State fans the wrong way. I think every Ohio State team, except for 2015 and 2014, would have lost to the 21, 22, and 23 Michigan squads, would have lost to all three of those teams. Every one. Which means that if Michigan took their 2022 team and replicated it for every year of Urban's tenure, he would have had a losing record. That might be bold. That might be excessive. It probably is. I just think Ryan Day's faced some really good, really elite Michigan teams. Some teams that have also had special assistants, too. Day's had a lot of the cards stacked against him in the rivalry matchup. That doesn't mean you can go out and lose to Michigan by an average of 2 touchdowns and a field goal. You can't do that. And Ryan Day, honestly, last year, even with Michigan's advantage, his team shot himself in the foot. I mean, the G. Scott penalty, not going for it on that fake punt, I think abandoning the run at times. Stroud threw some inaccurate passes that game too. Stover dropping passes. Those are not things where, or, that 4th and 1 play, Michigan didn't accurately guess that play. Stover was open, and I think it was Sainra still just closed in on him. Like, that was a perfect play call, just not executed well by Cade Stover. And that was the same for the 3rd and goal. That was another play where Stover was schemed wide open and Day out-schemed Minter, but Sainra still just had closing speed. Phenomenal player. I like Ryan Day, but this is from an objective point of view. He nearly beat Georgia. Last year, Ohio State nearly won the Natty after losing by 22 on their home field. And there's an argument, though I don't buy it, but I think it's valid. There's an argument that 21 OSU and 22 OSU were the better teams than Michigan. Michigan just had a scheme advantage, had a personnel advantage, had a November weather, November Big Ten style of play advantage, obviously had insider information, another advantage. There's an argument for it, in the same way that I think 2016 Michigan was better than 2016 Ohio State, but the Wolverines still lost that game. The better team doesn't always win. In fact, there's plenty of instances where the better team loses. That's why college football is beautiful, and that's why upsets occur. But yeah, Day, I don't think there's been much of a drop-off. I think, I will say, though, in big games, Annan brings up a very good point. Give Day time. I'm not going to read the whole comment because I really want to get this out. But give Day time, and right now he's 18-6 against ranked opponents. The only drop-off that I've seen is clutch game management. And Urban Meyer had a lot more experience in that, so that's probably why. Day's still learning as a head coach. Urban Meyer was close to the end of his coaching cycle at OSU. He had almost all the knowledge he could have gotten, all of the wisdom. The question is, really, it was adaptability and, getting the correct staff. And whether it was the defensive staff that wasn't good in 2018 or the offensive staff that was strange in 2015 and 16, and 17 was kind of an awkward year, just period. I don't know. I think that Day's a near elite head coach. I think arguing against that with his record, it just shows either you're a passionate Ohio State fan who doesn't like the fact that Michigan has aced him for the past 2 seasons, or you don't know college football. And I assume that people in this chat are the former if they don't like Day. They're mad that he lost to Michigan. But let me say, Day, despite having that 1-2 record against Michigan, A, he still has a win over Michigan, over Jim Harbaugh. B, he's 52-6. Jim Harbaugh 5 years in was nowhere near close to that. Look at the coach that Jim Harbaugh is now. And this is, of course, making the assumption that, Michigan wasn't totally reliant on cheating for Harbaugh to bounce back as a head coach, because I don't think that's the case. But maybe I'm wrong, and that it's just my personal opinion. But Day will win a national title. He will at Ohio State. I'm very confident in that. And you can record this. You can mock me if I'm wrong. I'm confident he will win a national title, if not more than one, with the way they're recruiting, the way the defense has operated this season. Day's learning. He's very similar to Lincoln Riley, except Day from the get-go has been willing to learn, willing to let go of staffers, willing to adapt. He's Lincoln Riley, but less of a control freak and less egotistical. That's very good news for Ohio State. He's also young. Day could be around for 20 more years. If he's around for 20 more years guaranteed, I'd say he probably wins 2 national titles. Maybe more. Who knows? Because Saban's going to retire soon, and at that point it'll probably be Georgia and Ohio State as like the top 2 programs. But that's going way into the future. Thank you so much, guys, for watching. I'm going to get off so I can pack because I got to drive 2 hours up north in like 30 minutes to an hour. But thank you very much. Really, I've had a lot of fun on this stream. We've been streaming for nearly 2 hours, and we have 38 likes. We got some super chats tonight. And just thank you very much for your time. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video. Comment your thoughts down below. And have a great day. Really. I'll make videos about, Michigan's situation if more news comes to light. Expect these videos tomorrow. They may not be consistent, these 10, 15-minute videos for every week, because I am experimenting this year since I want to do this full time. I am experimenting with how all of this stuff works for YouTube. So I'm trying new things pretty much weekly. But tomorrow, expect there to be different content, and expect these videos to be released probably throughout the day. Have a great day, guys. Thank you for